to today's webcast, Applying ML and AI to Revenue Growth Management. I'll give a quick preview of what to expect for today. We'll do some quick introductions, and then we'll really lay out the objective or the summary of the webcast, which is looking at RGM, which is a kind of traditional set of approaches and practices, and really seeing how the influx of modernization of AI and ML is really playing into that and it can help us approach it in different ways. We'll do that in 3 parts. We'll talk about use cases to really look at the modeling techniques and systems that are being built, and then we'll go into data as really the enabler and center of a lot of this, and then end with how we see putting these capabilities and insights into the hands of users or decision makers in the organization. My name is Ben Dunmire, and I'm joined by my colleague Ben White. We'll keep it easy with the first names. We're both data and AI consultants with Thorogood, and each of us spent quite a bit of time in the consumer goods sector, so bringing our experiences and also interest into today's session. To share a brief overview of Thorogood, we are a specialist data and AI consultancy operating globally. I'm joining today from the US and Ben from Brazil. We offer a wide range of services across end-to-end implementations, architecture, strategy, and design, and end-user enablement. Much like we'll share throughout today's session, we approach data and AI initiatives by focusing on business goals, challenges, opportunities, and overlaying on that what is possible from a data perspective and a technology perspective to identify and deliver ways to address those business objectives through expert application of data and AI. We are going to focus RGM on the consumer goods sector, knowing that it can be applied in different industries. And we flashed up here a few of the customers we work for and with in the sector, a number of which Ben and I are involved at, as well as an outline of various implementations we've delivered over the years. Looking at revenue growth management, it naturally touches a lot of business functions and requires a pretty wide and deep understanding of what drives growth and value at these organizations. So we'll bring some of that into this discussion today. To get into it, you might be familiar with RGM, so we'll use the acronym Revenue Growth Management, also NRM, Net Revenue Management, or SGM, Strategic Growth Management, or maybe something in between. To give us a quick definition, we see revenue growth management as processes, so strategies, investments, to drive sustainable and profitable growth on the top line and seeing that trickle down to the bottom line. Our interest today is to present it as a field that's really ripe for utilization of AI and ML techniques due to its breadth, its sophistication, richness of data, and the backing as being a data-driven topic. RGM certainly isn't new, and organizations have been applying its strategy for decades. We often cite the book How Brands Grow, which brought awareness to quantifying brand growth and has formed bases for RGM. We're operating in a consumer market that's complex. Consumers are random and less loyal than we lead ourselves to believe. Trends evolve rapidly, not just in what we purchase, but how, where, when, and what might compel us to buy. So looking at RGM, it's traditionally broken down into levers, usually 4 or 5, and you can think of them physically as levers that can be pulled and manipulated to impact and change decisions. So what are the things we can control? First, brand portfolio pricing, really looking at the individual pricing of products, things like margin. Channel pack price architecture is ensuring the right pack types and pricing levels are available in specific channels and thinking about how we maximize market share. Mix management, so what products do we sell where and alongside what others in our mix. And promotional management, looking at when and where and how we offer promotions. And then finally, trade terms or trade spend management, where we're thinking about the relationship between manufacturer and retailer. We know RGM is a time-consuming and detailed process that can rely on significant analyst time to support, and that can be a limitation in navigating data, identifying patterns, holding the context, and bringing all those insights to support a pretty broad process. With modern advancements, they allow us to start to address this issue. We can adopt modern approaches to gain greater insight with fewer analyst hours. We can identify relationships and trends that we wouldn't otherwise be known, and use more diverse information in the decision-making process. And that's really the intersection that we want to explore in this session. We're not going to build up the fundamentals of RGM, but really focus on how AI and ML are allowing us to do innovative things and enhance the activities we have long been doing. AI and ML has gained increasing attention in the last year and a half, particularly since the launch of ChatGPT in November of 22. That's shown a light on the advancements being made in AI, which is being fueled by cloud technology, democratization of innovation, the empowerment of open source communities, and the big bets being made by cloud vendors. AI and ML is not just language models, and you can see that represented on screen. Language and generative AI have focused on text and video, and that research investment has really led to a lot of significant growth in many other areas. So we really want to look at the full power of modern AI and ML and how it can be applied to RGM. We've been doing RGM for decades, and we now have to think how can we accelerate to do things more quickly, more efficiently, more accurately, and what new approaches can we take. We like to use this model to go through the conversation today and really guide how advancements in AI and ML can be applied to RGM. We'll look at how AI and ML has unlocked new data sources as well as novel ways to generate new assets, and that's allowing us to differentiate our RGM strategy. We ultimately need to get insights and capabilities into the hands of decision makers. Otherwise, the best designs and tools really have no value. So we'll consider RGM user engagement through automation and methods of embedding capabilities. And you kind of see these two things going into the center to the actual models and systems that we're able to now expand and sophisticate with AI and ML to explain what is happening and what will happen. So we'll work through this framework throughout the session. I'll start at that middle and the kind of models and systems. It's also helpful to keep in mind the 5 questions of BI and analytics. We'll always keep those in the back of our head. I'll build out the framework a little bit more and then focus for a few minutes. So thinking about new data assets, we can recognize that as brand new data sources. So most notably thinking about unstructured data, as well as being able to take information we've long had and get new things from it. So generate new attributes from it, for example. And then on the user side, we can think of AI and ML as being able to offer a never tiring autonomous analysis of what are nearly limitless intersections of data information, being able to bubble up the most interesting trends and insights and do a lot of that analyst work. And then really the center of it is the models and methodologies that we use that really need to start going beyond normal aggregations to generate insights. So how can we use somewhat complex models to model very complex business processes? And something I really want to get across is the identification and quantification of drivers and impact. So what is really causing things to happen in the world? I'm going to focus on this to start through a number of use cases, and Ben's going to touch on the other two. So the first one here, I'll talk about promotional effectiveness. And we think about this as trying to understand and quantify the impact that a promotion has on business performance. So what actually happens when we promote. We're wanting to quantify results, so through things like lift or ROI, get to the true drivers of promotional impact, and then think about how we can optimize promotions. So I'll take you through this use case. Like I mentioned, I'll kind of allude to some new data assets and servicing, but let Ben really get into it. One I'll call it here is being able to extract information from circulars or adverts and even textual information like market research. So on the use case, we often see it starting with what has happened. So a post-event analysis, we can look at when a promotion ran, for what products and where, and what the result was in sales or whatever metric. We want to take that and really turn it into a pre-event analysis. So an ability to concoct a formulation of a promotion and to predict the impact that it's going to have on business performance. So sales or share change or whatever, and really kind of see that as a forecasting simulation. So not just being able to say this is what has happened, but this is what we think will happen. And we can see the ramifications of that. Another thing that comes up and sort of feeds into this is organizations wanting to get a true definition of baseline sales, which is really sales devoid of promotional impact and any other impacts. And that really allows you to truly understand and quantify the impact or change from a promotion or anything else you do. And we see approaches using trees and regression to do this. So kind of see these things working together. Naturally, it's helpful to have that true baseline and to compare against. Really from here, we want to take the kind of formulation of what will happen and what is our forecast. To do that, we need to understand what are the drivers, what are the aspects of a promotion that really make a difference in predicting business performance. And that also tells us what are the things we should optimize. There are likely things that we think matter that don't, and vice versa. So really what we want to be able to get to is what are the drivers that actually impact promotional effectiveness, and then how can we change them, how can we optimize them. Some of the things we see being added into this are modeling price elasticity of demand, cannibalization, and post-promotion drift. It's really just giving us other pieces of information that help to say this is what we expect to happen and here's why. That's ultimately what we want to get to, and being able to kind of scenario model, do what if analyses. For each of these, I'll kind of allude to or really get to the business impact of what value or impact these things can have on an organization, because we want to, of course, always base it in that. Looking here, you can naturally see if we're able to better understand what impact a promotion will have on business performance, we can better understand what we think will happen and tune that to perform better, to be at the right time, to be the right mix. The other area I see as being valuable is being able to integrate this with other systems. So, for example, we know we are planning demand. If we can better expect what impact or what increase in sales will happen from a promotion, we can feed that into our supply chain planning or sales planning to ensure the inventory is available. I'll switch gears to shelf space analytics. So here we are wanting to really quantify and understand the actual value of shelf placement and then how that placement impacts business performance. And we can think of this as being an input to category management, trade spend, mix strategy, and pricing, among other things. One maybe data source I call it here is spatial information, and Ben will talk about a few examples. For each of these, we're thinking about how do we get into the ability to scenario model to do what-if analyses, both for a user or by a user, but also autonomously. On the use case, though, I think the starting point is really to see how and what we want to model in business performance. So things like velocity, share, sales, these are the things we want to understand. How does shelf placement impact these things? And from there, we have to think about all the different factors that we can use to explain shelf space. So the few I have here is a product, a vertical and horizontal position, the number of facings, the price, and that list can go on. So starting out, we really want to understand here are the factors we think are important. We can do some feature engineering. And really what we want to do is how do these things impact business performance? The approach I'm kind of suggesting here or using here is applying decision trees to be able to churn through very, very many different scenarios of information that we have and the various different factors grouped together to see what are the things that actually impact business performance and how can we quantify that placement on shelf. We'd always think about sophisticating analyses. One of the kind of recommendations is to kind of start with something and build up from there. Naturally, what this goes into is modeling for adjacency and by extension cannibalization. So what is the actual impact, if any, that adjacent products have on each other? And this just further gives us more information as to the drivers of what matters for shelf placement and how it impacts performance. We also see graph databases and algorithms as a way that might facilitate richer analyses on adjacent products. Ultimately, we want to work to is a scalable approach that we can include many different factors, mix and match those factors to be able to really quantify the value of shelf placement and then predict the impact from shelf changes. So it's one thing to really say this is what the value of a shelf and here are the key factors, and then using it to say this is what will happen if we move something or if we introduce a new product. In terms of business performance, we kind of first thought about the impact on trade spend negotiation. If we're able to really say here is the value of shelf space, that can be very helpful in that trade spend negotiation. The other point to make here is considering scalability and repeatability. We always want to take something and scale it out to apply it on other markets, other channels, other retailers, whatever. We can see the impact and value of doing that. I'd always be thinking about the ability to maintain specificity. Really a one-size-fits-all model, one-size-fits-all approach we really haven't seen fit, and we have to maintain that specificity of how a category operates or how a retailer operates. So there's got to be a balance of kind of scaling and broadening the impact, but maintaining enough specificity that it can be actually usable and actioned. The last one here I'll share is portfolio optimization, which a lot of people are probably familiar with, but it's really wanting to understand the full product portfolio and recognizing our highest value products, then the maybe least value products that we might discontinue. And I'd also want to bring into it how innovation fits in, because that's something that a lot of organizations are focused on. To build out the use case here, it's really starting with the drivers, and I've kind of kept coming back to that. But when we're looking at portfolio optimization, we're usually starting with margin, sales growth, sales volume, among other things, to really kind of rank and understand our portfolio. We want to get to what are the drivers for that? What are the things that help us to explain why margin is a direction? So cost being an obvious one factor example. Are we able to pull together enough information to be able to really model the impact and drivers that feed into margin, sales growth, and sales volume as a starting point? Because that really gives us the basis of these are the factors that drive portfolio performance. From there, we'd want to be able to do some sort of ranking classification. So it might be a simple literal ranking, but wanting to understand what are our best performers and why, what are our worst performers and why. I think the interesting we get to here is it's one thing to say, here are the things you should delist, but that can be a pretty brave thing to say. We really want to know what is the impact of delisting. So through these learned relationships of different drivers, bring in price elasticity, cannibalization, we really want to know not just what we should delist, but what will happen if we do it. Will it actually have negative results? Will it have even stronger results because it removes cannibalization? So it's getting that understanding of what is happening and why is it happening, and then helping it to understand what will happen so we can be better placed and better educated to make these decisions. I also like to think about sophisticating and adding factors. So an interesting one here is market performance. I think I'd much rather delist in a shrinking market segment than in a growing one, betting on the upside of a growing market segment as an example. A few things to call it here, I think I mentioned, is being able to sophisticate over time. And really what we want to be able to do here, and you've seen for a lot of these, is able to expect what will happen, but we have to have that from a learned basis of relationships and behaviors, and then be able to give us a confidence and knowledge into a decision-making process to say, this is what we think will happen, here is why. So I hope this was helpful to go through. I'll turn it over to Ben now, who's going to kind of address each of the sides about new data and servicing to bring all this together. So go ahead, Ben.
So Ben talked through some examples of the types of use cases where we really see the use of AI and ML delivering a greater degree of sophistication and insight than we ever have previously been able to achieve. I'm going to talk through the important enabler, the underlying data, and also cover how we start to embed solutions to deliver as much initial and ongoing business value as possible. So let's start here with the data. So as we've touched on, the RGM process has always relied pretty heavily on the use of data. We want to be building out as rich a data asset as possible that can support the various levers and views of the business. A base requirement is to ensure that our data sets are aligned, both internal and external, so that they're talking the same language and therefore can be analysed together. AI, as Ben briefly touched on, allows us to tap into new and novel data sets that may have been previously too time-intensive or disparate to bring into our analyses. We should be assessing how these sources can be integrated to offer new perspectives and a deeper level of understanding on things such as drivers of performance and the behaviour of consumers. We can leverage new techniques to derive enhanced and more dynamic attribution that may offer greater explanatory power than the more innate and baked-in attribution might, particularly in this kind of ever-changing consumer environment. Of course, data quality and governance is of vital importance, especially when incorporating into ML models that rely on the quality of information to produce reliable outputs. Each of these aspects are key to the delivery of a valuable data platform that can not only support RGM, but also other data and AI use cases around the business. We're just going to explore each of those in just a little bit more detail. So I won't spend a huge amount of time on this particular slide on aligning internal and external sources, as it's a pretty long-standing challenge when working in the consumer goods world and something we've really been helping our customers to overcome for decades. However, it is something that we need to be conscious of as we look through more and ever kind of varied sources so we can bring them into line with our data to be used in combination and maximize the potential. Also, whilst these challenges remain familiar, we can look to particular applications of AI and ML to support some of the perhaps more manually intensive tasks. For example, the mapping of data sources that are coming in with different product codings and mapping them into standard hierarchy definition. If we think of, retailer POS data sets, for example, we might be getting thousands from our retailer partners around the world, which is a pretty daunting task trying to map all of those together consistently. Understanding the various challenges laid out here will also be important as we build out our ML models. So, for example, having an understanding of the inherent lag between sales in and sales out when modelling on-shelf availability or out-of-stock risk. We typically see that many RGM solutions bring together internal data sets with just a limited set of external sources. Those sources are usually syndicated data, which are pretty useful because they're a single source of information providing a breadth of coverage across the market. We find that even with these sources, there's still a huge amount of analysis points for RGM analysts to sift through to really get to the insights required to drive the process. There are, of course, a wealth of other sources out there. We've got a few examples here on screen, and they can really help support deeper, richer, and more varied perspectives. Some of them we may have just left on the shelf due to the overwhelming nature of the ones that we're already leveraging. So data sets such as retailer POS, which I touched on before, is typically more granular, but harder to bring together. New data sets are starting to emerge from data and AI advancements, things such as footfall and socio-demographic information, aggregating from consumer mobile devices, or image recognition from promo circulars. Other types of sources we're now able to tap into and derive meaning from due to some of the advancements in AI capabilities. Again, Ben touched on some of these, but things such as market research documents, survey data, or social media information. Some examples of where these might come into play is using insights drawn from buying behaviours of different socio-demographic groups based on the footfall in certain areas that can really influence our assortment decisions in stores with similar demographics. Or perhaps using survey information to better understand the purchasing behaviours of shoppers on different shopping missions. Knowing the data and AI capabilities that we now have at our disposal, we are able to kind of process data at great scale, draw comparisons between data sets, and get to insight more quickly. So we can now turn our attention to these more varied data sets that can add a few more tones to the RGM process. And we might start to collect, commission, and store more data, knowing that there is some value to be unlocked. Attribution is, of course, a vital element in understanding market dynamics and to identify opportunities and white spaces, which is a pretty key aspect of revenue growth management. As we know, and as we've touched on, the landscape is constantly changing as consumers become more environmentally environmentally conscious, new preferences emerge, and trends change. So we tend to find that the attribution of the data that we're working with just doesn't keep pace with this kind of evolution. And that makes it extremely challenging to identify the underlying trends that really might be driving the performance. So aside from incorporating newer kinds of data sets, as we touched on in the previous slide, we can adopt AI and ML to really address some of these challenges. So we can utilize some more fundamental or foundational approaches, such as creating store clusters based on similar properties, which will form related groupings and support greater insight into the whole group than analysis on discrete individual stores perceivably could. Or we can leverage some more advanced approaches, such as an LLM fine-tuned on text-rich product descriptions, which we've scraped from online retail to classify and create unique views of product classes across our own and competitor portfolios. So, for example, the ability to label products as natural or not based on the ingredients that they contain and how they're being positioned online. So this ability to generate and incorporate unique attribution offers a unique perspective that only you will hold, and therefore generate some competitive advantage. In the end, we're just really forming some additional attributes in the data, and these attributes can be used for your analysis or feed in as a feature into your model to better explain the observed behaviors. And now, since we're working with more open formats that allow for evolving schemas, we're better able to handle this kind of flexible number and flexible nature of attribution and the greater cell space that it now produces. And then finally on this topic, data quality is, of course, of utmost importance when producing reliable models with reliable outputs, and more broadly getting to insight on trusted data that business teams can confidently take action on. This is nothing particularly new. We've been developing data quality checking into our solutions for decades, but it is increasingly important as we consider the sensitivity and reliability of our AI and ML models, which may be being used to create predictions, recommendations, or classifications upon which we want to take some kind of action. There are technological advancements that are making it easier to build more sophistication into our data quality processes to identify potential issues in the data and then handle that data appropriately. For example, identifying outliers and inconsistencies in the data that may otherwise go unnoticed. So having sight of how AI and ML can support the magnitude of different use cases that Ben touched on, and having a rich and reliable data platform in place to support them is only really part of the story. We need to consider how to embed to deliver business value, which here we've kind of broadly segmented into how we put the information into the hands of decision makers in a way that makes sense to them, and then how do we productionize and ensure the ongoing health and value of our ML and AI applications. Something that we need to be conscious of, as mentioned with any ML model, is presenting the outputs in a way that the users can trust and confidently take the action that's appropriate. These outputs can be seen as a black box and hard for business users to kind of unpick and understand. So here we really wanted to lay out a few considerations to help with that adoption and ultimately recognize the business value that can be obtained through these kinds of solutions. So first of all, bring the business on the journey with you. Taking them through the thinking and the progress can help to build confidence and buy-in. It's obviously advantageous for us to be validating with the business as we're moving through the development life cycle and making sure that whatever insights and outputs we're producing really makes sense in the business context. And it's important for our business teams to see what is being output, and they'll kind of get a greater understanding of what the models are producing as we are building in the sophistication. We want to consider how and where we're bringing these outputs to life. So we might want to embed it in a line of business application that might be familiar and commonly used, or use things like drillable notifications that bubble up as soon as the data is refreshed, so that business teams can get an early view of the underlying performance. One thing we should consider is the use of written word in place of standard visualizations that really might help to get our point across more clearly to teams. We touched on how business teams may perceive the models as a black box, since many models will detect complex relationships. As an antidote to that, we're finding that new packages are being integrated that allow us to really reverse engineer decisions that these large models make so that they become more interpretable. The packages such as SHAP or Shapley values that we can start to leverage to offer transparency. We may also want to offer up insights alongside a visual representation that gives some evidence in support of that particular insight. A perhaps slightly separate point, but related very much to the recognition of business value, and something Ben briefly mentioned previously, is we want to consider the degree of specificity needed for applications that we're developing. It can be tempting to want to build solutions that are broadly applicable. However, the generality of such solutions lose the nuance that could be potentially important to unlocking millions of dollars of opportunity or potential savings. A particular advantage of AI and ML models is the ability to work and derive insights at the lowest granularity. That's something that humans would naturally tend to abstract away. Consider, for example, the scale of the largest retailers, the Amazons, the Walmarts of this world. Small incremental gains can represent vast sums of money that are far outweighing the investments that we're making in the delivery of these kinds of applications. An example presenting to business users and an approach that we're hearing more and more from our customers is through the use of smart dashboards. So in my view, this is of particular interest in the RGM space, as we're trying to hold the context and bubble up insights from multiple intersecting lenses and levers. We can leverage the power of machines and artificial intelligence to work without rest, without getting bored, to cycle through the endless combinations of data and identify patterns that may be undetectable by the human eye and bring forth those observations in the data. So those observations can then be surfaced to analysts as a starting point for their own investigations, and therefore simplify a massively kind of data intensive process, and then allow attention to be given to a greater kind of breadth of geography or scope, or dive deeper into a particular area of concern. Finally, just touching on the need to ensure the ongoing health and reliability of our models here. It's important to have an MLOps approach in place. I won't go into very much detail here because MLOps is a broad topic, and we have a wealth of material out there on our website. But it's essentially the practice of automating the machine learning lifecycle from experimentation to production. That ensures that our experiments, data sets, and models are tracked, model training, tuning, and deployments are automated, and our models are being continually monitored when in production. This really provides for greater consistency of ML model management, increasing the trust in the quality of our outputs, empowers your kind of data science teams by removing quite a lot of the manual load on them, accelerates time from experimentation to production, helping to deliver value to our business faster, and visibility of cost of productionized models to business teams. So that's it in terms of what we were intending to cover. I just want to quickly wrap up here. So we've explored in this webcast how we can apply AI and ML to the revenue growth management process. We've been performing analysis and analytics to support RGM for decades, but AI and ML is really allowing us to go further beyond traditional approaches we have used in the past and apply advanced techniques to gain insights that were previously beyond us. We can work at a much finer grain at the required degree of specificity, process vastly more data, and we can hold the context from multiple different perspectives and surface those insights in a systematic way. The application of AI and ML relies heavily on having a solid data platform in place, and we can leverage AI to unlock and incorporate novel data sets and produce unique attribution to gain new perspectives. Of course, to achieve the business value, we need to put focus on how we place that information into decision makers' hands in a way that is understandable to them and upon which they can take action confidently. Many thank you for your time today. If you have any questions or want to get in touch, please feel free to contact Ben Dunmire or I. We have our details and QR codes up on the screen here, but that's it for now, and we hope to see you at the next one.